Every single time you're scrolling through your feed, liking a post, or dropping a comment, there's this invisible force at work. It's a massive, incredibly complex system of artificial intelligence, and it's constantly making decisions about what you get to see and what you don't. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and take a look at these AI moderators.
So who's really pulling the strings here? You might think it's a person, right? Or maybe some kind of oversight committee. Well, the truth is, for almost everything you see online, the very first, and often the very last judge, is an algorithm. But the real question is, how does it decide? And can we actually trust it?
All right, here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll look at the impossible job, basically why we even need AI for this in the first place. Then we'll get into the weird stuff, the arbitrary algorithm. After that, the biased machine, how AI picks up our own worst habits. Then we'll see how people are trying to wrangle this beast. And finally, we'll ask the big question, is there another way?
To really get why these big platforms turn to AI, you have to wrap your head around the sheer scale of the internet. It's just mind-blowing. Every single minute, you've got hundreds of thousands of new posts, millions of messages, and countless hours of video flooding online. There is no army of humans big enough to keep up with that. It's just not possible.
And if you want to see some hard numbers, just look at this. In just one 3-month period back in 2020, Facebook zapped 1.7 billion fake accounts. Billion! And that's just the fake accounts. That doesn't even count all the hate speech, the violent content, or the misinformation. It is a tidal wave of data that is way, way too big for people to handle on their own. So to deal with this mess, platforms created what's called a hybrid system. The best way to think about it is like a hospital's emergency room triage. Every piece of content you post, your text, your pictures, your videos, it first goes to an AI filter. And that AI makes a split-second decision. Is this harmful? Is it fine? Or, I'm not sure. And only that tiny little not sure pile, plus any user appeals, actually gets seen by a real person. So in reality, the AI is the one running the show.
Okay, so AI is a tool we pretty much have to use. But it is a really, really complicated one. And it turns out, this solution has created a whole new can of worms. And the first one is a real head-scratcher. The AI's decisions can be completely and utterly arbitrary.
So, the root of the problem is this wild concept from machine learning called predictive multiplicity. It sounds complicated, but here's the gist. You can have two different AI models, both of them top of the line, both considered equally accurate, and yet they can look at the exact same post and come to totally opposite conclusions. One says, yep, this is fine, and the other says, nope, this is toxic.
So how on earth does that happen? Well, researchers found that this randomness can come from something as tiny as the random seed that's used when the model is first being trained. It's like a single coin flip at the very, very beginning of the process that sends the AI down a completely different learning path. So get this, it isn't about one model being right and the other being wrong. It's about a fundamental randomness that's just baked right into the system itself. And look, this is not some rare academic what-if scenario. A recent study dug into this and found that across different data sets, nearly 30% and sometimes over 35% of content was subject to this exact kind of arbitrariness. Let that sink in. That means whether your post gets to stay up or gets taken down could literally come down to a digital coin toss.
But the problems don't stop with just randomness. Oh no, there's a much more systemic and frankly, more disturbing issue at play. These AI models are trained on data that we humans created. And in the process, they don't just learn our language, they learn all of our prejudices too.
You see, an AI doesn't have its own opinions or beliefs. It's basically a mirror, reflecting whatever it's been fed. And the oceans of data we feed it are, let's be honest, filled with all of our societal biases. So what happens? The models can end up unfairly flagging content from marginalized communities, they can reinforce harmful stereotypes, and they can wind up silencing certain voices, all based on things like race, gender, political views, or even the dialects someone uses.
Let's take a real-world example, like the Perspective API. It's a tool that scores text on things like whether it's toxic or insulting. The problem is, if the data it learned from has seen language used by certain communities next to negative content over and over again, the AI learns that connection. It basically learns to be prejudiced, and that can lead to perfectly fine speech being flagged as toxic, while genuinely hateful stuff that uses more coded language just slips right through.
And this is what's really crucial to understand. AI doesn't just mirror our biases. It can actually amplify them. It can make them worse.
For instance, a model trained on the Icelandic language, which has grammatical gender, didn't just reflect the existing biases in the text, it actually defaulted to masculine terms for jobs, even for jobs mostly held by women. It took a subtle societal prejudice and basically set it in stone, ready to be scaled up infinitely.
So, we're faced with these enormous, flawed, incredibly powerful systems, what some researchers have started calling an algorithmic leviathan. It's no surprise that governments are finally starting to realize they need to step in and, create some rules for the road.
For a long time, these big platforms basically operated in a kind of regulatory Wild West. But as their influence over everything from our elections to social movements has grown, well, that hands-off approach is quickly coming to an end all around the world.
And probably one of the biggest moves we've seen so far is the European Union's Digital Services Act, or the DSA. This thing is a potential game changer. It's designed to force large platforms to be way more transparent, and a huge part of it is this statement of reasons. Now, if your content gets removed, or even just gets downranked by the algorithm, the platform has to tell you why, and it has to give you a real way to appeal. It's a direct shot at that opaque wall of silence we usually get from automated moderation.
But here's the massive challenge. Even with laws like the DSA, trying to regulate these systems is incredibly hard. For one, these algorithms are often trade secrets. But even beyond that, they are so complex that a lot of the time, the engineers who built them can't even fully explain why they make one specific decision over another. It's famously known as the black box problem, and it's a huge hurdle for any kind of real oversight.
So given all these challenges, the arbitrariness, the baked-in bias, the nightmare of trying to regulate it, it is totally fair to ask, is this whole centralized AI-policed model the only way to do things? Well, there's a growing movement that's saying no, and they're actually out there building alternatives.
One of the biggest ideas is decentralization. You've got platforms like Mastodon, which is really a network of thousands of smaller, independent communities, and each one sets its own rules. Then you have things like Lens Protocol, which uses blockchain so you can actually own your content and your social connections. The whole idea is to shift power away from one single central company. But, and you knew there was a but coming, here's the catch. Decentralization doesn't magically make the problem of content moderation disappear. Not at all. All it really does is change who is responsible for it. So instead of one giant corporation in Silicon Valley making the rules, it's now the administrator of each individual server or community. The fundamental, messy, human problem of deciding what speech is okay and what isn't, that doesn't go away.
Okay, so if the big centralized platforms are flawed and decentralization just kind of kicks the can down the road, what else is there? Well, a third option is starting to gain traction, just carving out your own space entirely. Instead of trying to play by the rules on rented land like Facebook or X, some people are now building their own community platforms from scratch. This gives them total control over the rules, the vibe, and most importantly, the moderation.
And that really brings us right back to where we started. Out of sheer necessity, we built this incredibly powerful AI to act as the judge for our online speech. But now we're finding out that this judge can be totally arbitrary, flipping its decisions based on a random number, and that it's biased, soaking up and amplifying some of our own worst prejudices. So as we go forward, the ultimate question isn't just about building better algorithms. It's about whether we can ever truly trust the judgment of the systems that now shape so much of our digital world.